So what is the left's blueprint for socialism?
And my policies most closely resemble what we see in Norway, in Finland, in Sweden.
But it may be better to consult an actual expert, former Danish Prime Minister Lars Løkke Rasmussen.
I know that some people in the US associate the Nordic model with some sort of socialism. Therefore, I would like to make one thing clear. Denmark is far from a socialist planned economy. Denmark is a market economy.
The major political parties on the center-left and the center-right would oppose many of the proposals of Bernie Sanders.
Scandinavian countries are capitalist in wealth creation, but socialist in wealth distribution. For Swedish historian Johan Norberg,
it's really not a way of taking from the rich and giving to the poor, which is the perspective or the hope of many American and European intellectuals when they look at the tax levels in Sweden. What we do instead is that we tax consumption. We have a 25% VAT consumption tax in Sweden, which means that the poor pay the highest proportion of that.
the Scandinavians don't soak the rich, they soak the whole society. Scandinavia is not the left's real model. So what is?
I now pronounce you man and wife.
Where did Bernie go for his honeymoon? Stockholm? No, Moscow.
You know, it's funny, sometimes American journalists talk about how bad a country is because people are lining up for food. That's a good thing.
Where did Michael Moore go to champion healthcare? Copenhagen? No, Havana.
The Cuban people have free, universal health care. They become known around the world as having one of the best healthcare systems.
This is not a normal Cuban hospital. This is.
This is the emergency room?
Yeah.
Doctor, how old are these syringes? That thing looks like it's from the last century. Do you have sufficient facilities to sterilize all these old syringes?
No.
Most of your shelves have nothing.
Nothing.
The hospital in Moore's movie is only for foreigners who can pay and elite members of the Cuban regime. So Moore is colluding with the Cuban socialists to intentionally mislead his viewers. How these progressive leftists idolize socialist dictators.
Of my friend, President Chavez. He is one of the most important forces we've had on this planet.
Like a sick Hollywood love story.
How long has it been? We can bring it back again. Anything to spend.
Yes, this is the left's real model, Venezuela. My wife Debbie was born in Venezuela. She now mourns that her once prosperous country is now in ruins. Many Venezuelans fled to America, like my wife's friend. Gabby Franco was the first female shooter to represent Venezuela at the Olympics. She showed off her skills on History Channel's Top Shot. She and Debbie are big fans of the Second Amendment.
One of the things that is, I feel, a parallel between the Venezuelan left and the American left is their obsession with gun control.
Venezuelan authorities has vowed to crack down on guns as a pillar of domestic security policy.
It's, you know, like everything starts with a lie. This is for gun violence control.
Safety.
And at the end of the day, how can people rise against the government when they are disarmed?
What's striking to me is the closeness of this gun parallel, but it's only the beginning of these parallels between the two countries. One of them would be identity politics.
Right, so Hugo Chavez won the election in 1999, and he was indigenous. Venezuela is a very multicultural society. It has Italians, it has Germans, but he felt like there were not enough indigenous people in government. It was too white for him. So he decided to demonize the white people in Venezuela.
Another parallel is the demonization of the rich.
Much of the attack of the rich was for those entrepreneurs making a living, selling goods and services. So he decided to put a stop to that, setting price controls. So it drove many businesses out of business and out of Venezuela.
What about wealth confiscation?
Hugo Chavez had his national television show where he showed walking down the street and taking any apartment or any house he wanted and giving it to the homeless.
And today, if you leave your home in Venezuela and you go abroad and you come back,
someone else will be in it.
For Ruben Barboza, the future looks bleak. Over the past 40 years, he's built up a thriving cattle and dairy operation in western Venezuela. But this month, Hugo Chavez's government expropriated 30 farms in the region, and his could be next.
I developed all of this using my own intelligence and my own labor. And now that everything is going well, the government comes along and steals it from me, strips me of my land and my ideas.
There are more than 100 people working here. If there is an expropriation, we're all going to be out of work.
Let's turn to a different parallel, and this is the war on fossil fuels. How is it possible in a country that is so rich in resources that you would have electricity blackouts and gas lines for people to fill up the car?
Well, first of all, Hugo Chavez brought all his bureaucrats to take over. They had no idea how to run an oil company whatsoever. The American and British oil companies that were in Venezuela were basically run out.
All the engineers, everybody who knew what to do the job, they had to leave the country.
For fossil fuels, Hugo Chavez hated them, and he decided to do hydro energy instead. Venezuela had many, many droughts, therefore caused rolling blackouts.
Another parallel is the left-wing militants.
There is a group of criminals called colectivos in Venezuela, and they're very similar to our Antifa people here.
Colectivos got support from the government of Hugo Chavez, who work as the government's strong arm, intimidating and even killing members of the opposition.
Anybody raise their voice against certain ideologies of the government, they get terrorized by this group.
Le hago un llamado a los colectivos, a todos. Llegó la hora de la resistencia activa.
I grew up in a socialist country, India, which moved toward capitalism. And so India is doing a lot better. But Venezuela, which moved in the opposite direction from a capitalist society to socialism, seems to have crumbled.
This is how Venezuelans spend most of their time now, in line not for luxuries, but basics.
I moved from Venezuela to the Rio Grande Valley, and I thought I was moving into a third world country after coming from Venezuela because it was so wealthy. We had everything we needed and wanted.
It seems there's one class of people who are living pretty well. Who are they?
They're called the Chavistas. They're socialists. They kept their cars, they kept their way of life. They don't seem to have any problem with food shortage there. Hugo Chavez died a billionaire.
Under Chavez and now his successor Maduro, Venezuelan socialism started out as democratic, but quickly became authoritarian. Venezuela is where the Democrats are taking us, whether they admit it or not.